It's good to have Ross Brierley back with his 5 for Friday.
Hello and welcome back to 5 for Friday. My name's Ross Brierley. The national hunt season is just around the corner, but before that, let's wrap up the entire flat season in just under 5 minutes. The moment Johan won the Lincoln, we knew the flat season was back with a bang, but one name has been dominating headlines all summer, and that is, of course, multiple Group 1 winner, Baaeed. He now has more Group 1s than vowels in his name, and he was imperious in the Lockinge. He was devastating in the Queen Anne. He was fantastic in the Sussex Stakes. He was incredible in the International Stakes, and we're going to have to invent a new adjective as he goes to Ascot to beat another selection of inferior rivals in devastating fashion in a couple of weeks' time. But let's just take a moment to think about Hookham, Baaeed's full brother, who sat at home watching his younger sibling absolutely tear it up on the track whilst nursing an injury after an incredible success at Epsom back in June. Sure, we all want to see our siblings succeed, but maybe not this much. Back in second behind Hookham at Epsom, of course, was Piledriver, who was also one of the stars of the season. Every time you write him off, he comes back for Muir, and he laughed in the face of his SP in the King George, bolting up under a perfectly pitched ride from PJ McDonald. He's also out with an injury though, but having seen what PJ done, can we expect Piledriver to come back next year for a crack at the Arc? It's a shame not to see him amongst this year's Anton decks, but Britain's got talent in that regard, and there's plenty of C&D UK form on offer, so hopefully he'll return bigger and better next year and get ready to rumble. Song of the season was the Ballad of Frankie and Johnny, which, due to copyright, pride and dignity issues, I will not be repeating here, but of course the fallout between Messrs Gosden and Dettori took plenty of headlines. It all started with the misjudged ride at Epsom in the Oaks, of course, and the question of "Did Emily get up, John?" being met with a barrage of abuse afterwards. The saga then rolled on to Royal Ascot with, well, saga amongst others, but mainly Stradivarius in the Gold Cup, and it might well have pushed a trainer with no history of violins to want to string up his erstwhile compatriot after that race. Inspiral took the heat off a little bit, but it felt like their relationship was just that, in spiral, a downward one to be specific, but it wasn't until that genius ride aboard Trawlerman in the Ebor that things started to get back on a track. Our man might well be a menace when he's not in the zone, as Gosden said, but he still holds a place in our hearts. It wasn't just Dettori getting headlines for his exploits in the saddle. Christophe Soumillon in the Eclipse, of course, celebrating about 3 furlongs from the line, made Mikel Barcelona look patient with his exploits on Port Moi, and what was billed as a feature race of the summer looked more like a WWE Royal Rumble in its execution. Interesting then that karma came back to bite Soumillon on the backside at Leopardstown as Luxembourg got the dream run under Ryan Moore and Verdeni had to switch to that inside rail. We do, however, get a final matchup with Verdeni and Luxembourg at the Arc on Sunday, and what goes around comes around. Desert Crown, remember him? Oh, the most stirring derby finish since Paolo Wanchop waltzed through a Manchester United defence in 1997, as Sir Michael Stout's charge made his rivals look inferior in that imperious classic win. Evoking memories on the day of Chris Keane and North Light, it was more like Harbinger in the aftermath as Sir Michael Stout's charge was ruled out with an injury, and fingers crossed we get to see him strut his stuff next season. The final classic of the season went to Eldar Eldarov, named after an MMA fighter who was FPTP in the St Ledger, despite Dettori in behind committing borderline GBH, giving the stewards PTSD, and the punters at home thinking WTF. My heroine of the summer, of course, was Highfield Princess, who seemed to do everything right in winning 3 Group 1s on the bounce for John Quinn and his landlord, John Fairley. Great news that we get to keep the lights on in that Malton stable, and he might even get his full deposit back when he moves out. Minzal will go out on a blaze of glory on very fast ground at Haydock, which is a sentence I've never said before. And it's not just the jump season, of course, where you can come back and see your favourites win the same races over and over again. Rohan won the Wokingham again, Comanche Falls took the Stewards' Cup, and the ageing, greying Summergand keeps on popping up to keep that viewing public happy. In the staying division, it wasn't just Charles that was a newly crowned monarch, as Kyprios also displayed his authority and quirks in winning every race going. And with Trushan carrying the biggest weight to victory since Jan Molby in the 1992 FA Cup in this year's Northumberland Plate, and Coltrane also running an absolute cracker in the Doncaster Cup, we could have an interesting division next season, despite Stradivarius bowing out. The juvenile crop looked decent, especially from the Ballydoyle boys, with Blackbeard plundering the Middle Park and Little Big Bear winning the Phoenix Stakes in pretty noble style. Who also looks pretty talented as well after his Jim Crack win, and he could top the charts if he comes back for the Dewhurst in a week or so. Blackbeard wasn't the only Jolly Roger in the 2-year-old ranks, though, with Varian having a smile on his face after Sakia's win, and the Dam of Lazoo, Roger says, got an updated page after that one's Group 1 Sheveley Park. Dermot Weld might have an interest next year in the Irish 1000 Guineas, as he did this year with Homeless Songs, as Tahira looks another impressive juvenile, and a shout out to the best double act since Morecambe and Wise in the shape of Billy Lee and Patrick Toomey. They've really put it up to the big boys with some decent horses this year, in particular the likes of Pearls Galore and La Petite Coco. Long may it continue. Honours in the saddle, of course, go to William Buick, who's been absolutely incredible and made the Jockeys Championship look more like a Soviet dictatorship than a democratic league table. Honourable mentions go to Holly Doyle for continuing to bash down gender preconceptions with that classic win aboard Nashwa. David Probert for stepping into the shoes left behind by Oisin Murphy in truly pragmatic style. Andrea Zini for quietly having his best season for years. And Harry Davis for lighting up the apprentice ranks with barely missing a beat. 64 winners out of nowhere this season for him. In the training ranks, Appleby and Haggis of course took top honours, but it was baby-faced assassin George Bowie who impressed me the most, increasing his cachet in the 1000 Guineas before proving that it's a lot easier to train plenty of horses if you just never go back to the stables with them, as Oscula won every listed and Group 3 contest she could possibly turn up in. Given he's barely been in the job 3 years, it'll be incredible to see what he can do when he's my age, which is in a decade. What have I been doing with my life, honestly? Charlie Hills came alive. James Horton heard a who when his name was announced into the training ranks, but we certainly know who he is now. Carl Burke's season was so good it could well be dramatised for Netflix or Amazon. And of course, Rafe Beckett had a good year as well, headed by Kinross, representative of the poorly treated 7 Furlong Brigade, caught between limbo of Group 1 milers, Group 1 sprinters, and having to travel over to France to try and get their name on the headlines. That was it then, the flat season 2022 wrapped up in, I'm not entirely sure how long this has taken me, but I hope you're still with me by now. If you are, enjoy the weekend at Longchamp and beyond, and we'll see you next time.